In this video, you'll discover how my client with just 1,000 followers hit $40,000 in a span of 14 days and $14,000 in a day after launching his high-ticket mentorship. And all the client had to do was just make content and spend a few hours per week coaching the students that I brought in. So in this video, you'll learn the exact step-by-step process to launch your own high-ticket mentorship and then generate as much money as possible with it. And to make this as simple as possible for you to copy and paste into your own business, I'll break down the entire launch process that we followed to hit $14,000 in a day into 3 simple steps. The first step being the audience alignment, the second step being audience conversion, and the last step being the sales process that actually converts the audience onto the high ticket mentorship. I'll also drop some nuggets in between that not many people talk about that can make or break your launch. And if you're someone who finds this launch process valuable but feel like you don't have enough time to replicate it yourself into your own business, I do run a done-for-you team where we'll come into your business and build out the entire process for you in just 7 days or less. Now, with that being said, the goal of this video is to show you how to sell as many mentorships as possible so you can move to Miami, you can live the lifestyle if that's something you're into. But with that, let's get into step 1. So the first thing we needed to do when we were launching this program was figuring out who we're selling to and what the audience actually wants, right? And this doesn't sound sexy, but the best way to figure that out is to run a few calls with your audience, previous customers, your followers. And the way I see it is, you might think that you do know your audience, right? You know exactly what they want, you know exactly what they're struggling with, but it's like a personal trainer, right? An experienced personal trainer giving everyone the same exact workout plan. Yeah, they all could be obese, but they all need a personalized diet plan, a personalized exercise plan to be able to actually lose weight and maintain their results, right? So that's why you run your market research calls. And then you're able to plug in all your calls into ChatGPT. You're able to give it a prompt like this with some specific questions that you can pause and see here. There, you're going to get responses that will give you a creative brief, which is essentially a summary of exactly what your audience wants, what they're struggling with, and the path they need to take to get there, right? And it's also going to give you a sales argument, right? So this will help you understand what do you actually sell to your audience that they would literally kill for, right? And that's exactly what we did with this launch. We created a creative brief doc and a sales argument doc that we later will feed into all the marketing assets as well as the sales conversion assets that I'm going to talk to you about here in a second. Now, after you get your market research done and you know exactly what your audience wants, what they genuinely want, and what they genuinely struggle with, you're then able to build out your conversion assets, right? Which is step 2. And the conversion assets come down to 3 pillars of their own, which is content, your funnel, and your automations. So let's start with the first one being content, right? This is all the marketing and conversion content you're going to put out to actually launch your high ticket program, right? This is exactly what we did with this launch. Now, before you actually start writing your content, you want to make it as easy as possible, right? You want this to be something that AI could do for you, or at least get it 90% of the way done, right? Which is exactly what we did with this launch. So the first thing you want to do is get the tonality of yourself, and you do this by literally taking a YouTube video, a video like this, right? Where you're talking, plug it into GPT, and then ask it to give you a tonality framework on the way you speak, right? And this is something you can use so that GPT or Claude, whatever AI bot you use, can just write emails and can write any sort of content, story sequences, posts on Discord, on Twitter, in your voice, right? And it's going to sound just like you. It's not going to sound like an AI bot. And the second thing you want to do before you start making any sort of conversion content is put your background in a doc, right? So your come up story. How did you go from being, let's say the broke kid who had no money living in your mom's basement to being someone who now lives in Miami in a Miami penthouse and owns a BMW, right? So you put your come up story in a doc like this. I'm not sure why it's not loading here. Now, once you do both of those things, these are going to be assets that you can plug into AI. Then you're going to have more prompts, right? We have a story prompt, a Discord post writing prompt. I'm not sure why they're loaded in like this, but we also have an email prompt. And this specific launch, right, to hit 40K, we were trying to use every platform. We only had 1,000 followers. We had a little bit over 1,000 emails from previous launches and previous things these guys did. And then we also had a Discord community with around 1,000 members, as obviously that Instagram itself. So with these, we wanted to utilize every single platform. And for that, we had a story sequence prompt that we would use to write story sequences with for the launch. We also had a Discord post prompt that we used to write Discord posts, right, to drive people from the community into the high ticket mentorship. And obviously we had the same thing for the emails. Now, you might be wondering here, what do you actually write about, right? How do you get high performing emails, right? Where you're getting over 2.5 CTR, you're getting over a 35-40% open rate, and how do you write high converting stories as well as Discord posts? Well, what you're going to start with is going to be a schedule for your pre-launch and your launch. This is exactly what we did, as you can see here. And we pretty much scheduled posts, emails, and story sequences for every step of the way that we prepared beforehand. Now, here's the thing. If you don't plan out your posts and you're planning on doing a launch with random posts where you're going to hope that, it's going to bring in multiple 5-6 figures through the door, you might get disappointed. When you're launching a program, you can't be doing random emails here and there, random posts, random Discord posts, while hoping and praying that it's going to bring in multiple 5 or 6 figures through the door when your mentorship actually drops. Because typically having no structure won't allow you to do that. And that's why you need a structured posting schedule to hype up your program, and then an actual launch schedule when your doors unlock, right? When you build up that hype and unlock the doors for people to join in. And I typically like to do 14 days for a pre-launch, and then 5 to 7 days for the launch itself, where you have open enrollment for your high ticket mentorship. And if you think that you can just wing it, I mean, just imagine like a street artist, right, who performs a few songs here and there. Some days he's gonna play, some days he's not. Some days he's gonna make more money, some days less. And then think of your favorite artists, right, coming to a big city or maybe to your city, right? They're gonna put up posters, they're gonna run ads, they're gonna start building hype, 6 to 8 weeks out before their concert. And then they're gonna sell out the entire concert hall. And when you're dropping your own info product, we need to do the same thing. We need to build out hype and then ride that hype during your actual launch. And that's something we can also use AI for. The actual posts look like this. You'll have story sequences, you have your Discord posts, you're gonna have your emails, right? And then with these posts, emails, story sequences, here's what you're going to be talking about. There's 5 key pillars that you want to include in the structure of every post, email, story sequence. The first one being building anticipation and creating open loops, right? So Brez, he was recently doing his own launch. He was teasing it. He was teasing a date, 6 days before, and he was doing this for about 2 weeks. And then the closer Brez was moving to his launch date, the more he was actually teasing what was about to drop on September 15th when he did his webinar. It's just like Hermosi says, where you're going to whisper, you're going to tease, and then you're going to shout. The closer you get to your launch period. And that's exactly what we did. Now, the second pillar that we followed for this launch was agitating the prospect's desires and in future pacing the identity and the outcome they want. Telling them a story of where they're at now, right? Just like this guy here, to who they want to be, who they're going to become with our unique mechanism, right? By buying our product. So going from someone, playing video games in their mom's basement to driving a Lambo, just like this guy here. Now, the next thing you want to do is position yourself as an authority while bonding with the audience emotionally, basically saying that you went through this exact shift yourself, right? So you went from being this guy to being this guy in the Lambo here, and you took on this journey yourself. And then this is going to tell them that you're just like them, but you just found a unique mechanism. You found this unique way of doing things, whether it's dropshipping, FBA, trading, and then you became this Chad here who now makes money and has all the things that they ever wanted. And the reason you want to do this is because you want to create contrast. Humans are programmed to notice contrast. That's how we survive, right? We notice when something's off so we don't die. And contrast also makes us understand that we're not yet at our goals, which leads us to take action. And in this case, you're going to take action on your info product. Now, the next thing you want to do is handle objections before they come up, right? So you want to reframe objections in your pre-launch and then your launch sequences as well. For example, with our launch, a lot of people thought they don't have enough time for trading, right? They have work, they have school. So we turned I don't have enough time to trade into you can trade in just 60 minutes per day with the right approach. And then the last thing you want to do is obviously creating urgency and scarcity. And this is saying something along the lines of there being limited enrollment or the enrollment closing at X time to create the fear of missing out in your audience. Now, once you're done with content, the next step of building out your conversion assets will be creating your funnel. And the fastest and easiest funnel you can launch with will be an application to book a call funnel. For this, you're going to need GHL, you're going to need Typeform, and then Calendly. And I'm going to show you how all these things integrate together because this is exactly what we used during our launch. So with GHL, you're going to be using it to build out the funnel itself, right? The actual pages. And the first thing that you're going to do when you're teasing your launch, right? That 14-day pre-launch sequence is going to be build out a waitlist page. And on this page, you're going to have the desired outcome that your ICP wants. You're going to have a sub-headline that mitigates the objections your ICP has. You're going to have a opt-in form, and I like to use a button that contrasts the theme colors of the page in order to increase opt-in. It does work. The second thing you're going to have after your opt-in form is going to be a bullet list of what's in it for me, right? Or what's in it for your ICP. So if the headline and the sub-headline and the opt-in form itself doesn't convert them and they scroll down here, they know exactly what they're getting and they scroll back up and opt in. Now, if that's not enough, we're going to have proof. Then, as you can see on these testimonial videos, right, which prove that our mechanism works, we're also going to have a sub-headline, right? Some people are slow, so we need to guide them, right? Click on the image to play the video. And then we're going to have a thumbnail to actually increase clickability and make sure, if they want to see the proof, they know exactly how to play it and they're actually curious to watch it, right? This is going to educate people on why our mechanism works. Now, the next thing is going to be another wall of proof. And then at the bottom of the page, we're going to have another opt-in form. So in case someone does scroll down all the way here, we don't create extra friction where they just click off the page, but we give them another opportunity to opt in. And that's exactly how we got a 46% opt-in rate. Now, for your actual launch, right, we're going to run an application with a VSL to book a call funnel. And this is what that page is going to look like. You're going to have your eyebrow line, which is going to create urgency and scarcity. You're going to have your headline itself, which is, again, benefit-oriented. You're going to have your sub-headline that removes objections from the ICP's mind. Then, as you can see, we have some directions, right, so they know exactly what to do if they want to apply. We, of course, have a VSL to actually sell them and educate them on why the mechanism works and how it can change their life and how it changed your life, right, so they get sold on that identity. And then under this, we're going to have a type form that's going to qualify them for a call. Now, something that's very important with your actual VSL page and your waitlist page and the entire launch is going to be congruency. And a lot of people miss this. So the promise that you have on this page needs to be congruent with all the content that you had before this page that actually drove them to this, right, during the launch. Now, with this type form, let's actually break it down because this is very important. You want to have the highest completion rate on your type form possible while still qualifying the leads going through it. And with that, the biggest thing is just orienting the question towards them, right? So these are benefit-oriented questions and they know exactly what what they're getting by answering them. So in this case, they feel like they're benefiting by literally answering the question. And after they go through these 4 Typeform questions, if they're qualified financially and they have over $1,000 based on this question, they're then gonna go onto the Typeform Calendly page, right? And this is where they can actually book a sales call to buy your high ticket program. And that's exactly what we did during this launch. Now, there's one more bonus page that you can build out that I'm gonna get into here in a second if someone is disqualified, right? To not lose money on them. But before we do, once someone books a call, they're gonna go to their confirmation page, right? This is what we built out during this launch. And the reason we're gonna have a confirmation page is to increase our show rate and also increase how educated the prospects are on your product when they show up to the sales call, which is gonna increase your closing rate, right? And get more people through the door. And that's exactly what we needed to do, working with just 1,000 followers during this launch. So on this confirmation page, we're going to give them a reason to stay on the page in this top headline. Then we're going to create some scarcity, right? If you don't watch what's on this confirmation page, we might have to give your slot away to someone else. We have a post-call video, right? Post-call steps, setting the frame on what's going to happen on that call, what they need to do before their call, how they need to show up to the call in a quiet space with enough time to take the call. After this, we're going to have step 2. And by the way, if you notice, we have step 1, step 2. We have these headlines on purpose, right, for guidance, just to make it as easy as possible for a prospect who books a call to go through the confirmation process. In the second step, we're going to show them how to add their calendar event so they can get reminded by Google and not just by our texts and emails about their call. We're going to have a podcast that is kind of like an undercover sales asset, right? Because this podcast is all about handling the objections these prospects have, as well as transferring the trust to the closer, because this was a closer for the launch, right? So they see this closer doing a podcast with the creator, and then they see that closer on the call. So it's not their first time seeing the closer on the call, and that transfers the trust to the closer, right? It's not a new person they're seeing, right? They see the closer with the creator on the podcast, and then they see him later on their sales call. Then step 5 is for them to join the free community, right? Where they're going to see the gains channel. They're going to get to interact with members. Step 6 is going to be more results from the actual community. We obviously have these headlines for results to make sure to incentivize people to actually play these testimonials before their call, watch the transformations, right? Because if they see the proof and they tell us who they relate to, or they tell the closer when they start their call, that increased consumption will lead to more education and is going to get them to be more bought in. And the last thing we're going to have on the confirmation page is a wall of proof, right? Again, and it just keeps going, right? I cut it off here, but it does keep going. The bonus page that you can add is if someone's disqualified. If someone's disqualified, you can add a mid-ticket page or a low-ticket page, depending on the financial qualification of your avatar and who you're selling to, your audience. And essentially, if someone has under $500 here or under $1,000, instead of going onto the sales call where we know we can't really sell them, especially if they're also underage, right? That's another question we had. Because they don't have access to financing, we sent them to a mid-ticket page where they were able to buy a product for just $497. They could get it on split payment plans for as low as like $45 a month. So that way, we're also making money from the disqualified leads with a sales page like this for a mid-ticket product. Now, after you build out your funnel and you got your content assets, the last thing we're going to do in GHL is going to be the actual automations, right? And this is crucial. It's often overlooked, but it's going to be the actual automations, the emails, the texts that send to prospects who opt into your high ticket funnel, right? And then potentially don't buy, right? Or they opt in and, some of them could misclick, they don't opt in, things like this, right? So the main automations we're going to have is the new convo automation, the mid convo automation, call book confirmation, right? No-shows, and then call fail. And we're going to have a sequence of messages and emails for each one of them. This is exactly what we did during this launch, right? We had a new convo automation, a follow-up automation, right? The mid-convo is if a prospect asks a question, let's say you answer it, and then they ghost you, right? So then they would be enrolled into this. If someone books a call, right, we need to make sure they actually get reminded of that call, they get redirected to this confirmation page, they don't forget to watch through this confirmation page, right, and get educated about your product before they show up to the sales call. We're going to have the call confirmation automation for that reason. And then obviously if they don't show up, we want to get them back on the calendar. So we have a no-show sequence, a call failed sequence if they show up to the sales call and then they don't close. And then we're going to have as a bonus, right, if you build out a mid-ticket page or a low-ticket page, a mid-ticket failed sequence, right? So if they don't buy, we're going to try to recuperate that purchase and make our money there. So that's essentially all that you're going to set up for step 2. That's all we set up at least. And then after that, we moved on to step 3, which is actually designing your sales process. And for a launch like this, at least this is what we needed, right? To hit 40K with 1K followers, we need a dialer, a DM setter, and a closer. The fastest ways to get them is going to be through referrals typically, which you can get from sales managers. Here's some of them on the screen, but typically you can just find them, right? You're going to see their content, and then you can ask for setters, dialers, closers. That's the fastest way you're going to get A-tier talent. So with your Instagram, the DM setter is going to be reaching out to people who like your content, right? Who are curious about the launch. With the GHL, they're going to be responding to questions about the launch. And then you're going to have a closer as well, who's going to be using Zoom to actually close people, right? And sell them onto your mentorship. And for all of these people, they're going to have their own individual scripts. Your DM setter is going to have a DM setting script. Your dialer is going to have a dialing script, right? And your closer is obviously going to have a sales script. This is what we built out during this process. And typically what's going to happen is your DM setters, your dialers are going to book a call, or someone's going to self-book a call from a type form, from the type form process we went over. From there, your dialer is going to call them to confirm them, right? This is how we had it set up, right? This is to make sure that they're actually good for that time, that they receive the resources, the pre-call resources they need to go through to educate themselves. And at the same time, when a dialer does confirm them through the admin dialer, they're also going to connect them with a closer in a group chat. This is to transfer the trust from the dialer to the closer before the prospect actually speaks to the closer on the sales call. And this also creates an extra touch point to make sure the person shows up. In that group chat, the closer is going to send a pre-call selfie video or a voice note to introduce themselves. And then from there, the only thing that's going to be left, besides just, the follow-ups that we built out here, is the actual confirmation call the night before their sales call, right? To confirm if they're still making it the next day. And that's something that your dialer would also do with their own script. Now from there, there's going to be two things that are going to happen, right? The prospect is going to show up, or they're not going to show up, and they're going to get enrolled into the no-show sequence, right? If you've done everything right, you should have a 80% show up rate, 70 to 80% show up rate, which is exactly what we hit with this launch. We were at 82%. And when they do show up, they're going to be sold onto the high ticket. With this launch, it was 4K, or they're going to be downsold onto the mid ticket, right? If they can't afford it for whatever reason, they're going to be downsold onto a $500 mid-ticket program. Now, one thing that you could do that we didn't necessarily do on this launch is adapt your prices, right? So let's say you have a mid-ticket product. You can sell that from $500 to $1,000, right? If your minimum to enter the program is, let's say 1.5K, your mid-ticket product can be downsold for $500 to $1,000, depending on how much cash the prospect actually has. And then from there, the prospect would get onboarded, and then the actual creator would start the fulfillment process. And that's pretty much it for the launch. Now, if you're still watching this and you want to replicate some of this launch process and possibly launch your own high ticket program, but maybe you don't have the skills or the time to do it yourself, as I mentioned at the start of the video, I run a team and we can do this in 7 days or less, completely done for you, right? Where you don't have to commit any time to it. And for that, you can book a call in the description down below, or you can DM me on Instagram if you have any questions. Please book a call with me. Please DM me. Please.